Greetings, everybody. It's Brett Hanover from MoneyGuide. Thank you so much for joining us. I'll speak more towards the end of our call today, but our friends from Tolerisk are going to be joining us. We have both Mark Friedenthal, the founder and CEO of Tolerisk, with us here. We'll start with some comments from Mark, and I believe he will be handing it off to Ryan Wheeler, who is the Chief Technology Officer at Tolerisk. We'll go through how Tolerisk measures both dimensions of risk tolerance as identified by the SEC, how we can validate client assumptions using robust analytics, and it'll really drive greater confidence in the overall planning process, how to measure and align portfolio risk for each unique client, as well as how to measure and implement risk by account tax status, and to better understand our clients' relationship with risk in general and what it means is in terms of their future of their financial plan. So let's take a look. I'm going to hand control to first Mark from Tolerisk. And
let's see here. How about that one? Brett, thank you so much for having me, and I appreciate everybody joining us today. We are really excited to launch the integration with MoneyGuide. It's something that advisors have been asking for a while, and we're just thrilled to work together with the fantastic team at Envestnet MoneyGuide. I am gonna, for those that may not be familiar with Tolerisk, I'm going to give you a little overview. I'm going to walk you through a little demonstration of our risk tolerance technology, and then I'm going to pass things over to Ryan, who's really going to focus on the integration with MoneyGuide specifically. By the way, I happen to have up on the screen here the tolerisk.com/MoneyGuide page. There are a lot of great resources that MoneyGuide provides when you're logged into MoneyGuide, but if you're ever looking for additional resources or just sort of a collection of them, you can go to tolerisk.com/MoneyGuide. Ryan, I'm not sure if you can paste that in the chat box, but just as a resource. So here is your logged in view of Tolerisk with my fictitious advisors, Inc. Let me start by pointing out, as Brett had mentioned, really what's unique about Tolerisk compared to other risk tolerance tools is that we cater specifically to the fiduciary process, and that is the SEC's two-dimensional risk tolerance assessment kind of paradigm. So we're going to allow you to measure not only somebody's willingness to accept risk, meaning a personality profile, but also the client's ability to take risk. And that's using cash flows and goals, and that's why it jives so well with what you do in a comprehensive plan with MoneyGuide. I'm going to open up an assessment here. There are actually a few different variations of the risk tolerance assessment. They're all two-dimensional. They're all in keeping with the SEC's two-dimensional framework. The one I opened here is a Tolerisk Pro assessment. This is the most customizable solution. This is the one you're going to want to do with your wealth management and planning clients. There's a 5-minute light version also that comes with your subscription. That's perfect as a sales tool, as a prospecting exercise. It is going to have fewer inputs and fewer outputs. The third tool, by the way, is specifically for use with 401k participants when you serve at the plan level. So that's another variation of the exercise that you might find useful. As I mentioned, we use the SEC's nomenclature. You'll see that in the upper right-hand corner of my screen. We are currently looking at the willingness profile. This is what's called a psychometric profile. It's a psychology exam. It's going to allow us to measure Jane Doe's personality. Jane Doe is a very real client of mine. It's going to allow us to measure Jane Doe's personality, specifically how risk-seeking to risk-averse she is compared to a large population who's taken the same exam. Now, you can use a 10-question or a 20-question version of this. You can collect responses from Jane or Jane and John, or meaning they can answer separately, or they can do it collaboratively together, and that's really up to you and the client. By the way, you can do this with the client live, and live these days could mean through screen sharing, of course, or you can send a link to the client. You can let them provide responses at home, working on a smartphone or a tablet or a PC, and then you'd reconvene and review with them. So the second dimension is called ability to take risk. Some advisors use the term capacity or financial capacity, although we stuck with the SEC's terminology of ability. You can see we are not going into the same level of detail that you do with MoneyGuide in terms of cash flow modeling, goal modeling, and tax modeling. However, even though everything financial is on one page, this is a pretty flexible architecture, and the integration that Ryan's going to take us through will show you how you can launch a risk assessment from within MoneyGuide, and you can populate this page, and that saves you time, it saves the client time, it really streamlines the exercise for everybody and ties the two-dimensional risk assessment directly into that financial planning process. So it really brings the best of both worlds together. I'm going to walk you through this assessment. I created a more complex assessment just so I could highlight a little bit of our features and functionality. So certainly they're not all going to be this complex, but it'll give you an idea. We do accept the various inputs from MoneyGuide, as mentioned. I'm going to highlight one specific one here, which is this goal of buying a house next year. And so the reason I use this is a very large withdrawal or distribution for this client relative to their resources, and it's happening in a very short period of time. The reason that I like this example is it gets everybody thinking about what we should expect for Jane and John Doe's ability to take risks mathematically if they're pulling out a lot of their money in a very short period of time. And you can imagine that this is going to reduce or suppress their ability to take risk, at least until they get past this event. Once they get past this event, we are going to see that their time frame until further distributions is going to be much, much farther out in the future, and that is going to drive up their mathematical ability to take risk. So this concept of ability, when it's measured properly, it's objective, it's mathematical. That's the drive towards Tolerisk, and I think that's why we've seen such extraordinary reviews in surveys like the T3 and Inside Information survey, where we've eclipsed our chief competitors. It's really all about being able to measure someone's ability to take risk objectively, mathematically, and we can measure how it evolves over time. We're going to see that in this example. As you can imagine, we're not expecting that today's relatively low ability to take risk, as driven by this large withdrawal, is necessarily going to stay that way in the future. Functionally, you can always have as many of the goals as you've got with the client. By the way, totally separate and distinct from their personality, their willingness to accept risk. So let's go ahead and get to some outputs. Before I do, I want to touch base and just mention that everything in Tolerisk uses that industry standardized scoring scale of a broad stocks to bond style benchmark. So if you get a 60 in Tolerisk, or I should say if your client scores a 60 in Tolerisk, that indicates a risk level equivalent to a diversified 60-40 portfolio. Makes it easy to communicate, easy to compare to things that they've experienced before, easy to map to model portfolios, including the models that you may be utilizing in MoneyGuide. I think there are 7 or 8 models that are available, and you can easily model them in Tolerisk as well. So here we do see scores for Jane and John Doe. These are just their willingness scores, just their personality scores. Now, it may be appropriate to set the overarching cap based on Jane's score. Maybe Jane is the primary decision maker, or perhaps it's more relevant to set it to John's score, or an average of the two, or for the ultimate flexibility, you can override. Now, I know we have a large group on today, so I'm sure we have folks in different kinds of roles. When we talk to advisors that are producers, generally the reason they want to elevate this exercise is what I would call business development. They want to impress prospects because that's who tends to become clients. They want to deepen confidence with clients because that's who sticks with the plan, they stick with the advisor, and frankly, they're the ones who make referrals. For those of you in more of a corporate seat, a lot of the focus is often on compliance. The corporate advisor or corporate perspective tends to want a process that's objective, repeatable, documentable. They want it to be consistent from not only from one client to the next and 1 year to the next, but they want consistency from one advisor to the next. And by the way, speaking of compliance, I think this is what jogged my thought here, is that there may be times when you are talking to the client about these things, just as you would throughout your planning process in MoneyGuide, and you have to pay deference to that dialogue and experience. So if the client's communicating something different where you need to deviate from this range or you need to lean one way or another, you can always override. You can lift or lower the cap, and the rest of the math is going to flow through, and you're going to document it right here for compliance purposes. Okay, I'm going to put it back the way it was, and we're going to take a look at some outputs. Tax rates, inflation rates, growth rates. One of the really cool innovations is that we built mortality probabilities directly into the simulation to account for the variance around how long Jane or John Doe would be around and thus need their resources. So when we get to the outputs, we're going to see the recommended risk directive, and we're also going to see a barometer so that you can feel good about giving them advice on a recommended risk directive. So that's why it's helpful to have this little barometer right here so everybody can feel confident in the assumptions even before the risk directive is selected, which is obviously one of the primary inputs into your MoneyGuide financial plan. So this Tolerisk score of 36, this tells us that this client should have 30 to 40% in equities or other risk or growth type assets. The balance is typically going to be in lower risk assets, lower risk fixed income and cash and the like. Now, this does not mean that we think it will stay 36 for the life of the client. We're able to measure how this evolves over time mathematically, and you're able to incorporate that into measurements like probability of running out of money. Let's take a look at how we expect this particular client's glide path to evolve over time. I'm actually going to toggle off what we call the projected Tolerisk score. That's the custom glide path, so you can see the components more clearly. The blue curve or line, depending on how you look at it, starts out at a 36. This is their ability to take risk right now, but we see it evolve over time. It actually bottoms out next year, not surprisingly, when they go to pull that $200,000 out to buy the house. This was a large withdrawal for them. Of course, if this client had $20 million, that $200,000 wouldn't really move the needle that much. But in this case, the example is where this is a large withdrawal. And once they get past this, we see their mathematical ability to take risk goes way up, at least for a while. In fact, it goes beyond the green line. The green line is where I set the cap. I use the average of their two willingness scores, their personality profile. And as a fiduciary, someone who's conducting a two-dimensional assessment, you want to pay deference to both dimensions. You are not going to want to suggest to the client that they take more risk than you believe they're willing to accept, even if you can demonstrate, for example, that they have the mathematical ability to do so. You are paying deference to both. When we look at the projected Tolerisk score, which is that custom glide path that's built into all the other analytics, we see it's their ability to take risk over time subject to the cap. This is a very popular chart to incorporate into your client's report. You do not need to do all of these or incorporate all of the content that we have available. It's designed to be flexible for you. So you can create the report and have the presentation tools that you would like for a given client. You might even choose to do it a little differently for one client over the next. I'm going to show you a few of the most popular ones, of which this is certainly on that list, and then I'm going to turn it over to Ryan, who's going to really focus on the integration itself. I'm going to actually back up one. One of the features that advisors really love about Tolerisk is that we're able to measure ability mathematically, and because we're accounting for the timing and the size and the location of every cash flow, every goal, every distribution, we can measure ability as it's differentiated by tax status. So in my very exaggerated example, where this couple is planning a very large withdrawal to buy that house next year, you already know that you're not going to recommend they pull money out of those IRAs and 401ks to do that, and that they are going to pull it out of the taxable assets first. And that because of that, they're going to need to take less risk, or they should take less risk in those taxable assets. Where advisors tell us it gets very challenging is measuring it, quantifying it. And here we're able to do that for you. Now, in my exaggerated example, there's a huge difference in risk, about 11% in equities or other risk assets to be held in the taxable assets. And of course, they can take the bulk of their risk in those IRAs and 401ks because they're so far out in time. And that'll tie back in this case to the Tolerisk score of 36. You can, manipulate these things and move slider bars to navigate, and maybe you want to tag certain accounts at certain risk levels and things like that. For those of you that want to build your model portfolios in, you can have as many model sets as you like. You may have one set for ESG portfolios and one for high dividend and one for individual securities or funds or things like that. If you would like to score the risk of your portfolios, which is a very popular feature, then you'll have to do it with tickers. And you can incorporate it right into the risk assessment. Here's an example where we would demonstrate that this is a bullseye for this client. This is very properly aligned, but maybe this is a new prospect or it's a new client and they're coming over from another advisor who didn't really properly align the risk of their portfolio. And when you measure it, you are able to demonstrate to the client that, the portfolio you have now or you've had so far this year is really not properly aligned for you, but we are going to fix that very soon. So that's another way to do it. I'll tell you one of the favorite charts for those who are still working, this would be your clients who are not yet retired, is a funded level chart. This shows what percentage of their future expenses are funded and how they're making progress towards a fully funded retirement. And if they want to retire earlier, it illustrates what the trade-offs are for an earlier retirement. Should they decide that is more likely or more desirable, that change in assumption can impact their ability to take risks. So all these things are tied together. And as I mentioned, you can completely customize this report for the client. You're not expected to use all this content, but it's nice to have these kind of arrows in your quiver, so to speak, so that you can decide how much content is appropriate for that client. I am going to turn presentation over to Ryan, who's going to walk us through the integration specifically.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having us. And Mark, I appreciate you going through the demo. So now we get into what does the integration do? And as Mark said, the inputs into the ability section, that absolutely is helpful if you have that data already pre-populated. And for a lot of you who have been using MoneyGuide for a long time, or even some of the newer users, you may start by entering a lot of that information in the MoneyGuide, and maybe you're even pulling it from other sources. So to be able to quickly go into MoneyGuide and launch an assessment directly from MoneyGuide into Tolerisk is extremely useful and saves a lot of time. So I'm going to give you a quick overview of what that client flow is, or what the flow is through MoneyGuide. And if anybody has any questions, please feel free to reach out. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be looking for people to give us suggestions on what they think the next stage of the integration should be, and we're looking forward to doing that quickly. So once you're in your MoneyGuide account, the first thing you want to do is, of course, jump in and go to the planning section. You also can authenticate Tolerisk right from the options section. So you'll go in and just type in your credentials to Tolerisk. Once you've done that, you will go in and search for one of your clients. So I'm going to take one that I've already completed. This is my James and Jill Williams. From there, you'll see a Manage Integrations button. That Manage Integrations button is going to show you a link to Tolerisk. When I click on that, you'll have an option to search for the client, and it'll pull in all of your clients in Tolerisk to search by, and you'll be able to link it directly. So in this case, I've already linked James and Jill Williams. So now what I'll do is I'll go into one of the plans that I've already created. In this case, I've created a pretty simple plan. This is going to go into a two-person plan where I have a couple that's in their mid to the late 40s, and in this case, James is 50 years old. They're not planning on retiring until their mid 60s. We've outlined a number of different expenses. We've outlined a bunch of goals. So now, because I have all this information in here, now I want to go in and launch Tolerisk so I can figure out what the appropriate risk tolerance is for this couple, so that when I'm going through the rest of the plan, I can make a good decision about the asset allocation, because we know that that is such an important input into the plan. So now I go into the option section and go to Launch Tolerisk. And you'll see that Tolerisk opens up. It automatically authenticates because I've already done the authentication before. So it does an SSO or a single sign-on directly into Tolerisk. And the first thing that you'll see is just a general assessment setup. So it's going to name it, and I'm just going to say risk assessment review. I'm just going to name it here. It's going to automatically pull my client. I could change information like which willingness questions it uses, or I could even take an existing assessment and append the information that I used previously. Next thing I'll do is I'll look at what the inputs are that came in. So we have information about James, we have information about Jill, we have their general monthly expenses, we have all those non-recurring expenses like the car, the home improvement project. We have information about their investment accounts and the tax status of those accounts, and then we have the retirement income sources like pension and annuity income. So when I hit next, it's going to take me to the start of the assessment. So this is generally where you would go through and start filling out the personality exam. Now, I don't have my client handy, so I'm not going to fill that out for them, but maybe I've already done that and I want to combine that together with this assessment, or I know that I'm going to be sending them a link after this and I just want to focus on the ability section. So now you'll see when I open that up, I have the information pre-filled. I have their current age and retirement age. I have information about their expenses. I have all of those non-recurring expenses like the sports car, the travel, the home improvement. And I have the account level details by tax status. And I have some of the custom income sources like pension and Social Security, or the annuity income, excuse me, which I can customize a little further if necessary. So just like Mark, I'm not going to go into the results now because you've seen what it looks like. If I go into another assessment, you'll see I filled out more information here. So maybe I go in and I look at the results. And when I get to the results, in this case, I have a Tolerisk score of 50. So now that I've figured out what the appropriate risk tolerance is for this client, now I want to go back into MoneyGuide and I want to use that information. So if I go into the same plan for the same client and I go to household risk, you'll see a little orange marker here which shows the Tolerisk score. So now what this has done is it's went back into Tolerisk and it's pulled the information from the result. And now I can utilize this information in my plan so that when I'm selecting the right risk score inside of MoneyGuide, it's consistent with what I filled out in Tolerisk. And now I can go through and run the rest of the plan and make sure that I'm using the most relevant information in the results. So that's the current stage of the integration. As Mark mentioned, there's a lot of stuff in Tolerisk that you could utilize when working with your clients. Obviously, MoneyGuide's got a lot of information here as well, and we look forward to continuing to bring those two tools together. The last thing I will mention, and I think Mark has probably already mentioned it, is that we do have a discount or referral code that we're going to be providing. So when you're going through and purchasing your Tolerisk subscription, make sure you use that referral code, and I will make sure that Mark or Brett sends it out to everybody.
I actually posted it, Brett. I posted it in the chat room. So if you can, I think you have to repost it to the broad group. But the code itself is MG Advisor. Capital MGA, MG Advisor. But Brett, if you can post that, that's great. And just important, we are happy to take you and your colleagues through a private demonstration where we can go in deeper. We can show you a variety of different tools, and we can really answer questions that might be more specific to your firm. Brett, I posted that as well, that link in the chat room. So if you can post that to everybody, that would be great. And that way, for those of you that do want something more personalized, we're happy to do that. If anybody has questions, whether for me or for Ryan, you can absolutely type those in the chat or the questions. And I think Brett, you might have to read those. I'm not sure that I have access to them. But if anybody's posted any questions, please feel free.
I will look here. I don't see questions at this point. Are you gentlemen both now seeing the get started with a free trial with the Tolerisk contact info and the MoneyGuide contact?
Yeah, so it's really for a demonstration. If there are those that need a trial, we can do it. Typically, you'll get a lot more out of your trial if you go through a demonstration. We show you how to use it, and imagine that's similar to what you would do with MoneyGuide as well if you were a new user or trying it too.
Correct. And I'll take our audience today through a little bit of the MoneyGuide screens, as I believe there's quite a few on the call that also do not have MoneyGuide licenses today, but I wanted to make sure they saw this as well, and then we'll work to get the other information out there. I have a few little disclosure purposes here that I'll be required to share with folks here. And then now I'm going to actually go into some information. So those of you that don't already have an existing MoneyGuide license, gentlemen, are you seeing the 3 colored columns there now that I've switched? The
Yes.
one Pro and Elite. All right, thank you for confirming. So for those of you not entirely familiar with the MoneyGuide lineup, we have different versions. If you're with a large enterprise firm, there's a chance that you would actually get access to a MoneyGuide license or even a trial of the MoneyGuide software through your large enterprise firm, depending on who you are with. But for the rest of the crew that are more in the independent space, we do have different flavors of the MoneyGuide software, if you will. I will say that the most popular option is the MoneyGuide Elite on the far right side there. It's something we launched about 3 years ago, and as you can tell from the check marks on the far right blue column there, it gets a little bit deeper with some enhanced client visuals related to secure income modeling, total income modeling, tax planning modeling, which really the most popular piece in that is the Roth conversion. There's some really neat visuals, and then advanced lifetime protection modeling in the MoneyGuide Elite. And then the Pro is the software that's been around for decades. It's been the #1 software in the industry, 15 years running. So just to have a flavor for, some folks want all the bells and whistles, but we do have different flavors for different needs depending on where you are at the stage in your practice there. I'll take that away. Now, presumably everyone sees the My MoneyGuide license here with Ross and Kate, my fake client in the MoneyGuide software. Just to give everybody a little bit of a 30,000 foot overview for those unfamiliar. We tend to be known as software that can get output very quickly. We have advisors that can build plans in as little as 5 minutes. And some of that is we just don't need quite as much detail that some other software requires before the results will illuminate and you can take a look. So in the MoneyGuide space, it's all about really who are they? Goals represent the spending that the client wants to be able to enjoy that'll be paid for by the portfolio. We don't need every line item categorical spending detail to get the meaningful results. Often the client just wants to know, can I live on my lifestyle I'm used to today? Whether that's some, $1 million a year or 50 grand a year, you can get that output very quickly in MoneyGuide. We can accommodate all the things you would expect about their existing resources financially, because that'll play a big part in can we fund those goals. And then the risk and allocation score that you saw earlier in the presentation. Once those 4 sections have been illuminated, you'll get a feel for the probability of success of the current scenario as entered. We're going to run the 1,000 trials. The one thing no advisor can promise a client is the exact sequence of future returns. So we want the majority of them to leave a client with enough money to fully fund those goals every single year and not even be $1 short. And for this fake client of mine, with the entries on the path they're on today before I make any recommended changes, they're at 35% success. So only 35% of the 1,000 trials could fully fund the goals. If you're a details, numbers kind of person, you may appreciate the Explore button underneath houses all sorts of detail that can be pulled up. Most advisors are presenting right from within the software now. and you could look at the explore button for all these details for any scenario here first. Yes, in the top right corner is a place to hit finish and report. If some people still will present from reports, so those can be generated there. But once I've got a feel for, okay, 35%, not great, but at least it's correct, then you can hit next. And we give you a few different ways to make the adjustments to raise that probability of success up into this green confidence zone. It'll vary by age, but generally speaking, you want the client up into that 70 to 90% success range. And as you can see, I've already taken steps to raise this fake client up into that confidence zone. So speed and time, the one element you have the least of in your world, personally, professionally, and otherwise. This super solve button here in the bottom left quadrant can be a great way with one click, and it'll do the math for you to determine, well, how much more saving do they need to do each year if they're still working? Or maybe we need to work an extra year or two, unfortunately, to raise the probability of success a little bit. Or maybe we're only going to get to enjoy less spending in retirement. So maybe we adjust the size of the goals that we're trying to fund. Or maybe all three of those things have to happen in order to raise the probability of success up into the confidence zone there. So SuperSolve is a great way to do that. With one click, you can eyeball and approve the changes. And if you say save as recommended, then that becomes your new official recommended scenario. Notice it didn't let you get involved with introducing new variables to the plan. So the what if worksheet here is a place in the MoneyGuide Pro and the MoneyGuide Elite versions where you can do that. Multiple scenarios side by side. I've got my current scenario as entered here. My recommended scenario is going to be here in the center. And then you don't always have to, but often it's nice I could have additional what if scenarios side by side to compare and contrast. What is it going to take to get them into the confidence zone, manipulating different variables? So as you can see in that center column, 83% is the one I made my official recommended scenario, but I might have been trying to evaluate something else. Like, what if I take a survivor pension option that's a 50% instead of 100%, for example? What if I take a different investment allocation mix? How do those things affect the probability of success of my plan? I can also do things like opening a new account, or maybe working part-time, making at least some money for a few years. When I've been made, quote, retire to help keep the portfolio afloat, I can introduce other things, Roth conversions, new guaranteed income solutions, all sorts of things, different contribution levels to existing accounts, or perhaps a whole new account. All things can be done in MoneyGuide Pro and MoneyGuide Elite from this what if worksheet. Okay. And if I go back to my plans, there's also I'll go back into my financial goal plan here. Okay. So in the Elite version, well, my life insurance needs analysis is across the top in a section called protection. In the MoneyGuide Pro version, it's actually going to be on the left side of the recommended scenario page. For insurance, we do life insurance, long-term care, disability needs analysis, all can be done in MoneyGuide. There's a nice page about risk reward, again, playing into Tolerisk's world a little bit here. Why take more risk than necessary? Can show what types of probabilities of success would come with various a more aggressive to a more conservative portfolio. There's a Social Security maximizer in both Pro and Elite, where we'll lay out a nice grid with various Social Security filing ages for you. If that's part of how you serve clients, when should they file? We'll lay it out in a nice grid for you. We don't want them necessarily giving away money. And of course, quite often the answer is deferring to 70 makes a lot of sense. So this table can kind of lay it out nicely for everybody. Here, column 5, winds up being the biggest lifetime benefit, assuming they live as long as they're supposed to. But I can even stretch it out a little bit and show them, hey, yeah, just by simply deferring the filing of social until 70, you raise your probability of success of funding your goals, 4 more percentage points with something pretty simple. So it's nice because you will have built the plan out for the overall situation much more, and you'll be able to provide advice on those things in a way, it doesn't have to be in a vacuum. When you go to the elite version in MoneyGuide, you get some enhanced client visuals. That's part of why it's been so popular. So for life insurance people, there's a way to look at how much do they need. It's not going to be just on a die today basis, but also 5-year increments into the future. If clients look to you for their how much life insurance do I need, this column here will tell us. And we're solving for an amount of life insurance where we don't just assume the death benefit grows in a straight line from that point forward. That's not realistic, of course. So it's taking into consideration the survivor's life and I've targeted 75% of the 1,000 trials, leaving the surviving spouse with enough money to get to the end. In this case, we need 3.6 at the beginning, but it declines over time. This fake couple is in their mid-40s. I can hit show solution, and I get a very nice, very simple, enhanced client visual. This is in the elite version of MoneyGuide now. And clients can absorb this and understand the green dots represent their amount needed changing over time. And there's a further solve for term policies in the bottom center that has come up with this tiering of a 10-year term in blue for this much, with a 20-year term in green for this much, to meet their needs over the long term. And yes, if permanent insurance is part of how you serve clients, you can certainly edit that permanent solution based on these green dots as well. So some enhanced visuals there related to life insurance. For income planning, you can certainly recommend on the what if worksheet new income guarantees. If annuities are part of your business, that's wonderful, but you may prefer the elite version. If that's the case, there's a secure income button in the elite version here. I can click cash flow. And it's going to give us more than just, did this annuity raise my probability of success meter number? We want to give you a little more to go on here. So if we're looking at the secure income view, this orange line represents the goals in the plan, representing the spending we're planning for, and looks at where's the money going to come from on a guaranteed income basis only in this view. Social Security is going to get them this far. That's great. Okay. And I'm actually going to turn off the annuity. I think you have a foreshadowing of what I'm doing here. I'm going to eventually recommend this fixed indexed annuity here. But first, we want them to understand the problem. Social's only got to get them that far. And then if they have a pension, great. That'll help pay for things in retirement. But all the rest of this in red is spending they've said they had to have that will not be paid for by guaranteed income. So if you're going to recommend something with new guaranteed income, we are product agnostic. You can do SPIAs, VAs, fixed index, all of it. I've chosen to do a fixed indexed annuity for $300,000. There's an input screen that talks about which bucket of money are we going to carve dollars from to fund the vehicle, and let you input all the particulars about the income guarantee aspects of what you're recommending. And then you kind of present it. Here's the before. Notice all the red on the right hand side. We summarize it, and then I'm going to tick the box now to turn it on, what I'm going to recommend and why this helps improve things, makes them less dependent on non-guaranteed income sources. And there'll be this new sliver here, a purple guaranteed income that wasn't there before. And if I'd put more than just $300,000 into this, I could have had a much bigger purple sliver, of course. But conceptually, clients understand a very simple, colorful graphic like this to help understand why might you be recommending something that generates new guaranteed income. If you would never do an annuity, or maybe this client isn't appropriate for that, you would still want the total income button, where the orange line now represents all the spending goals in the plan, not just the needs. And we're bringing in both guaranteed and non-guaranteed sources of income. So social will get us that far, the pension again. RMDs, not in any way guaranteed, but we can certainly use them to pay for things in retirement. And then regular old portfolio withdrawals. And if I am going to recommend an annuity, great, that purple sliver will still show up here. But probably the majority of clients, no annuity or not, they still want to know, where's the money going to come from to pay for my stuff? And we've got detail aplenty for the people that really like to get into that detail. Here, the combined details can be pulled up year by year by year, but sometimes advisors say, that's a lot of numbers. Can I give them something simpler and more visually pleasing? That's exactly what Elite will do, is bring it to a place where clients can get comfortable faster and more likely to act upon your recommendations related to these topics. All right. We have also recently launched something called Wealth Studios. It's been launched just in the past few months here. I highly encourage, if you do planning related to estate planning, particularly I'll call it advanced estate planning, CRATs, CRUTs, GRITs, GRATs, NIM, CRUTs, intentionally defective grantor trust. If that alphabet soup there is part of how you serve clients, then please, you're going to want to reach out to our team to talk about something called Wealth Studios. And we also have launched a tool called My Blocks. My Blocks is meant to be a client self-serve tool that you would give them access to through the client portal. No more time out of your day, but you can grant them at most firms. Again, please check with your own firm's availability and rules, but blocks are across the bottom here in a tile. We built this to look and feel kind of like Netflix, something clients are familiar with and comfortable at home. And maybe all they want to do is go in and play with one particular block, whatever their hot button issue is. Maybe it's, I'm the adult child of a client of the advisor, and the advisor gave me access to these blocks tools. I can go in and look at, maybe it's, how do I pay off credit cards? Everyone's got 5 minutes to look at that. Or I've got college loans, or maybe I want to do maybe I'm starting my family and I want to look at on themselves, they can do it and look at insurance needs. Maybe they want to do a 5-minute basic retirement forecast. If they have access to blocks through your license, they can go in here. You would be notified that the client went and did that. And you'll see a check mark like this one here in the top right corner, a little check mark indicating, well, which block did the client go into? You'll get notification email that they went into blocks, and you can see what they did. And if they did a basic retirement forecast, for example, and indicated they've got several $100,000 put away for retirement already, that might be a person that you want to reach out to pretty quickly so you can help them manage that money. But they'll get some high-level answers and some tools here to play with by themselves. And maybe they do one block, but what we find often is they do blocks over, they do 2, 3, 4, 5 blocks. Next thing you know, you've got the pretty good start to the makings of a fully comprehensive financial plan and MoneyGuide. And yes, some of those blocks data will port over into the main financial goal plan, and you can just pick it up from there. We just launched something called Next Best Dollar. Often the question is, what do I do? I know I need to save for retirement, but I also don't have an emergency fund saved up. I might even have some credit card debt still. How do I know to which I should apply my next dollar? What's the best use of that dollar? So that blocks, it actually is a sequence of blocks if you go through that. But notice even the complete sequence only takes the client 15 minutes. So it's meant to be easy and reduce the barrier to providing planning for clients there. So that is a very high level at the planning tools. And let me pull in my PowerPoint again for the crew. And we'll make sure to follow up with, again, if you don't have a MoneyGuide license, here's our contact information as well as Tolerisk's. And gentlemen, if you know how I can share the links you mentioned in the chat with our larger group, I'm happy to do so. I'm not seeing that
Yeah,
functionality?
we posted them. So if you look in the chat, you can see the ones that we posted, Brett.
I do.
There's really, and so if you copy that, and then you should be able to post to the whole group. So the last one I put in there is the Tolerisk.as.me/MoneyGuide. That's how anybody can sign up for a private demonstration of Tolerisk, and we also put in there the Tolerisk.com/MoneyGuide, which is just a resource page, and that MG Advisor, which is how the MoneyGuide users will be able to get a 10% discount on any Tolerisk subscription.
Yeah, forgive me. It's not allowing me to copy what you've done to then paste it myself.
Okay, we'll work on getting them out to people by email.
Excellent. Yep. So again, thank you everybody for joining. We certainly appreciate the time. We typically will follow up with a link to the replay as well. And we thank everybody for joining. Have a great rest of your week. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us, and thanks everybody for joining us.
Take care.